Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, October 21st, 2019. And that's all the news for this weekend. We'll be back after this 1 hour and 59-minute break. No, there's much more, of course, to catch up on. Greg Dworkin will be with us to help us figure that stuff out and lay it out for you as best we can. It's been an interesting weekend. No golf this weekend. It was too rainy in the Washington, D.C. area. I don't know if he could have escaped to New Jersey and escaped the rain, or may have socked in the whole East Coast. I didn't check the weather report. Neither did he. He gave up and stayed home and tweeted frustratedly about various subjects, including, well, the cancellation of the plans, apparently, to host the G7 meeting, which I'm sure he would have tried to turn into a G8 or a G9 with the secret rooms at Trump Doral. But he's decided not to host the G7 meeting there after all sorts of pressure. I guess he spent the weekend tweeting angrily that it was angry Democrats who had prevented him from doing this fabulous thing for the country. He spent about 30 seconds pretending that it was something that he wanted to do to save money for taxpayers by, I guess, really honestly, by falsely hinting first that he would hold the event at cost, which no one ever knows what that means with him. At cost can mean anything for him, and he can claim his costs or anything he wants. And then he went on to I guess he felt like too many people had caught on to that, and said he might even hold it at zero cost to American taxpayers. That is, host the conference for free, which was never going to be the case either. And also, of course, he just would have jacked up the prices that he charged the other 6 world leaders for housing their entourages at Trump Doral to make up for the money that he's no longer funneling out of the Treasury and putting in his own pocket. But the whole thing has fallen through, as predicted, as it turns out, by our own Bill in Portland, Maine, who tweeted a few days ago. I included it in the morning post for the show. I can scroll back and find it. I had it positioned on one of the more important stories to tell you, but nothing's more important than acknowledging what Bill does for us each morning and tweeting our wake up tweets, and everybody should get online and listen. But Bill had tweeted back on Saturday, I guess, that many people owe him many thousands of dollars for correctly predicting that the G7 would never be held at the Trump Fleabag Motel. They're saying to me, "Sir, how did you know that? How did you know that? You were right. You're amazing, sir. Amazing." And I think so. I don't know when the prediction actually came, but it was a pretty good guess that he might not get away with it. In fact, though he is blaming Democrats for forcing him off of this particular stance, it turns out that it is much more likely that it is the Republican reaction that has forced him off of this. This was just too much to have to defend, which honestly, I guess, comes down to a strategic problem with Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff at the White House, who I guess never put together that coming out in a single presser to, one, admit that there was a quid pro quo for in the Ukraine situation, inexplicably, I guess. I think maybe there might have been some strategy to it. There might have been, that was maybe the tip of the spear, if you will, on the, yes, there was a quid pro quo, but doesn't matter. We can do whatever we want. Either the quid pro quo that was being arranged was not illegal or unethical or troublesome in any way, or that it was another, maybe it might eventually have evolved into one of those "it doesn't matter, it's not illegal if the president does it" stories, but we didn't get that far. Laura Clausen, as a matter of fact, has a front page story all about that terrible, terrible press conference. Mulvaney again fails to walk back his quid pro quo confession and makes the Doral debacle worse. And, well, it is worse. The weekend went badly for Mulvaney, and I guess we now are supposed to start speculating about how long he lasts in the post. It might not go on forever. His tenure as chief of staff, or for whatever reason, by the way, they continue to insist that he is acting in that capacity. That he's the acting chief of staff, and that doesn't change anything. Really, you don't have to be confirmed by the Senate in order to be the chief of staff. I don't know why they don't simply say he is the chief of staff. And I guess the speculation there is that if he's named the chief of staff, that will remind people that he's also still is he still in the acting capacity at OMB, or is that his official job? And I guess it would remind everybody what a scammer he is, and how thin the Trump troops are spread. But at any rate, Mulvaney spent the weekend going on television defending his comments, or not. He didn't defend them. He was asked to come on to explain or defend his comments in which he admitted to the quid pro quo last week, and he didn't do that. He just simply came on to assert that it wasn't a quid pro quo. And the best anybody can do to make sense of it is that it is Mulvaney's position that unless you say during the deal the words quid pro quo, then nothing you do can make it a quid pro quo. And I honestly think that's the position that he's sticking to, and that Republicans are going to stick to. It doesn't make any sense in the real world, but this is just one of those things that they're able to get away with. And to this point, there's still some question about whether or not that's going to work with the media. They seem in part to actually be willing to accept, well, look, the answer you're going to get in these interviews is, I never said the words quid pro quo, so therefore it's not a quid pro quo, at which point the television hosts anyway say, we've got to go to commercial, or we're out of time, we're just going to leave it there. And they begin to realize they're not going to get any other answer out of him. And so, they argue for a little while. Well, that's the definition of quid pro quo. They'll go on for about 5 seconds. And then he just says he's not going to concede the point. And then we talk to him about other things, like not hosting the G7 at Doral, which also looks likely to collapse into its own mini story as we begin to realize that all the tales about how many other venues were vetted, and only Trump Doral had the right combination of whatever the hell it is that goes into a G7 meeting, and most people don't know. So the White House typically, when it's run by competent people, can announce what those parameters are and say these are the places that met it. But Trump, in the initial announcement, the initial round of announcements, that was that Doral had beat out all comers. And now they have no plan B, because the truth is that nobody looked at any other contenders. It was steered to Doral from the beginning because it would profit the president. There was some talk about other venues having been checked out, but then when Trump tweeted that he was giving up on Doral, he said, the search will begin for a replacement. The search should already be done. You should have been able to go to the second choice after Doral and just move it there. But they didn't, because there was no other selection process. It looks likely at this point, perhaps, to land at Camp David as a backup, because that can actually handle the setup. It has done it before. Obama hosted one there, and it got mentioned by Trump. So we may land there. In the meantime, anyway, we should shift to other details on these stories and more with Greg Dworkin, patiently, silently waiting in his house until the bear leaves. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. And I really did have a bear.
Yes.
Came to visit.
A bear of a weekend.
Yesterday, and was sitting. I got up to fill the bird feeders, and it turned out as I was about to walk out on the deck, this fellow, Yogi, had beat me to it. And was crushing the bird feeders like a peanut between his powerful paws, and just snacking. And I decided to panic, of course. So I stayed inside. And the thing to do about bears is just leave them alone, and they tend to wander off.
Yeah, good. Okay.
But I called the local cops and said, we got this bear here. And actually, it's a known bear. He's tagged. His ear tag said number 217. And the cops said, oh, yeah, that's Yogi. He's been around town. He just wanders from place to place. He's pretty docile unless you provoke him, so leave him be. Keep the dog inside.
Okay.
And he'll wander off. But the cops showed up anyway. And we watched him wander into the wood together.
Okay. Well, that sounds like an exciting weekend. It'd be cool if he began. Well, maybe not. If he began to hang around, I guess you don't
when
want
David
to.
posts this later today on Daily Kos, hopefully there'll be a picture of the bear. I have one on the Pundit Roundup this morning if you want to see what it looks like. Now, brown bears, this was a full-grown male, are a lot smaller than the brown bears are much bigger, the ones I saw in Alaska, the grizzlies, than this guy. He's a black bear and fairly small, but fat. And cuddly and getting ready to go into torpor. They don't really hibernate. They don't lower their body temperature to near freezing. But their heart slows down and they tend to sleep. They can get up if they have to poop or whatever. But sometime mid-December, they'll go into their den, and then I can put the bird feeders back out.
All right. Well, that'll be fair timing. I think if the bear hung around and also made noise when your neighbor left for work at about 9:45, that might be an interesting
that would
phenomenon.
be. But anyway, that was the exciting stuff. The other stuff was kind of interesting. I got a twofer on Mulvaney.
Hey, boo boo, at 9:45. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Smarter than the average bear. I don't know. He just wandered off, and it was amazing watching him take the feeders down. Just one swipe of that powerful paw, and that was the end of the metal piece that was holding it up. It was amazing.
So much for metal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mulvaney had a twofer, and let's start with the original press conference. And this comes from Jack Goldsmith, Legal, who was looking at it from kind of an interesting process point of view, because don't forget, Mulvaney isn't just Trump's chief of staff; he's also head of OMB.
Yes. Well, in one or the is he acting at both, or just at the?
He's
White
acting
House?
Chief of staff, but I think he's head of OMB. I think that's where he picked up all his other roles from.
Okay.
But I don't know, and it doesn't really matter.
I forget how he progressed.
Trump.
Well, I'll look it up. Okay.
So at Lawfare, Jack Goldsmith had written a piece called "The Role of OMB in Withholding Ukrainian Aid." In other words, there are legal obligations to give the money, and withholding it may be illegal, not just immoral.
Yes.
So that's a piece. So Goldsmith writes, I just watched the amazing Mulvaney press conference. It was an extraordinarily weak and damning performance. I think he set out to deny a quid pro quo with Ukraine. It's now a quid pro don't quote me. But he tied himself in knots and strongly suggested there was one. But that wasn't the only problem. Goldsmith was watching to try to figure out, quote, what he said about the reasons for delay in releasing the Ukraine funds to see whether the reasons were consistent with OMB's legal obligations as outlined in the post he wrote for Lawfare blog. At first glance, it doesn't appear that the reasons he gave for the delay are consistent, and more on that later. But what stunned him, Jack Goldsmith, was how Mulvaney damaged the ongoing Barr-Durham investigation into the origins of the 2016 investigation of the Trump campaign. Now, this investigation, if conducted properly, is entirely legitimate. Durham was a credible choice, and he's got an FBI ex-assistant who everybody says is a straight shooter, though Barr damaged the investigation when he appeared to slyly prejudge it. The investigation's credibility was damaged much more by Trump's infamous call with the Ukrainian President Zelensky, whom Trump encouraged to contact Barr. This made it appear that Barr and his investigation were tied to Trump's problematic Ukraine machinations. By the way, narrator voice, that's because it was. Department of Justice said at the time that Trump had not spoken with Barr about Ukraine or the Bidens. It also said Barr had not communicated with Ukraine, but Mulvaney brought it up again today. There's an ongoing DOJ investigation into the 2016 election, said Mulvaney. So you're saying that the president cannot ask somebody to cooperate with an ongoing public investigation into wrongdoing. Two problems with that. First, Barr had stated he's not looking at Ukraine, probably because the Ukraine link has been entirely discredited. And second, no evidence yet of wrongdoing. The explanation given by Mulvaney is thus baloney. Now, again, Goldsmith is a conservative trying to give him every benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
Mulvaney doubled down later in the presser when he said that one of three justifications for the delay in the funds was whether or not Ukraine was cooperating with an ongoing investigation with our Department of Justice. Again, obvious baloney. And note this was before the Sunday show. Mm-hmm. Note this, one of three justifications, because by Sunday, that third justification, whether or not Ukraine was cooperating with an ongoing investigation with the Department of Justice, in other words, outlining the quid pro quo, that third justification was gone by Sunday. On Sunday, he said there were two justifications for the delay.
Yes.
On Friday, he said there were three justifications for the delay.
Yeah, he held
then
three
he
fingers
claimed
out,
everybody
counted
was
them off.
misquoting him, and it was all the press. Except there's the tapes.
Right, which show you just that. That is, I mean, it is pretty remarkable to back off of the three. I mean, he gestured the three, and he ticked them off, and he touched the
when
finger
I said
for
three,
each one.
I misspelled three. I meant two.
Yeah, it's as clear as day. But okay,
right, and Department of Justice called him on the baloney. If the White House was withholding aid in regards to the cooperation of any investigation at the Department of Justice, this is news to us, said DOJ. They were utterly confused and angry, I'm sure they were, and much more. The lack of coordination between White House and DOJ in such a hugely important issue touching on impeachment and Mulvaney's predictably self-defeating statements are stunning, and DOJ now has a big problem. Barr's already under fire with justification, but also with some overstatement in my view, for the manner in which he is conducting the review into the opening of the 2016 investigation. I guess his point is you can investigate whatever you want to, just do it fairly. But now his department, which determined that the president's phone call with Zelensky didn't implicate a crime, is stained by the president's effort to cloak itself in legitimacy of the Durham-Barr investigation. And I believe, Jack Goldsmith, conservative, that DOJ has to do much more than release one-sentence distancing denials. Barr or Durham needs to say at a podium or in an attributed statement that they lack any interest in Ukraine and reject POTUS's efforts to cloak his increasingly problematic Ukraine machinations in their investigation. Otherwise, the investigation is hopelessly compromised.
Yeah,
by the way.
Pointless.
It is hopelessly compromised.
It is, and they can't get out from underneath it. Honestly, even if they reject the Ukraine connection, there's the enormous problem, not discussed here, of Barr flying to Rome to investigate an equally discredited connection. Pardon me, insisting that the Italian intelligence agencies tell him all they know about Joseph Mifsud and the shenanigans and the setup of this, what he thinks is the setup of the origins of the Russia connection, which turn out to be, relatively as explained the first time. So he's flying around the world like Giuliani, except this time directly on the government dime, trying to collect information on Alex Jones level conspiracy theories, and he's doing it consistently. And the idea that he's doing those but not Ukraine is, frankly, difficult to believe.
So looking at that whole big picture conference, Lindsay Cohn, who's a political scientist at Naval War College, said she heard a brief NPR interview with Representative Scott Perry, and this was on October 17th, on the Mulvaney comments, and wanted to clarify some things here. There's currently three different explanations circulating for why the aid to Ukraine was held up. One, because Ukraine might be corrupt and we want them to investigate themselves, plus Hunter Biden to prove to us they're not corrupt enough to deserve our money.
Okay. They're not corrupt. That's I get you. It's poorly
right?
phrased.
So, of course they're corrupt, and it's our job to go look. Second, Ukraine was supposed to be helping Department of Justice investigate the totally baseless theory that Russian interference didn't happen. It was a false flag by Obama, Clapper, and Brennan. And Ukraine stopped helping us investigate that, so we held up aid until they went and started to investigate.
That was okay.
Right? And that was Representative Scott Perry's explanation.
The second
well, of course we held it up because they're supposed to go investigate this because it's all based on an 8chan, 4chan conspiracy theory, and why shouldn't we look?
Right. Between the two Chans, one of them's got to have it right.
And then third, because Trump wanted Ukraine to find or manufacture dirt on Biden. That was Arms for Dirt, which is actually the most plausible explanation. And it was done in order to deploy it against Joe Biden in a general election to help himself get reelected.
Yes.
So how do we think about the plausibility and legitimacy of these explanations one at a time? As far as UK corruption goes, wanting Ukraine to demonstrate its commitment to fighting corruption is a legitimate reason to hold up aid if the president wants. That's basically what Biden did.
Yes.
Ukraine was corrupt at the time. It probably still is. But that particular group, the president and his appointed prosecutor, were corrupt. They weren't investigating corruption. And Biden wanted the prosecutor fired. So pressure was brought to bear.
Yes.
It's a little weird, she says, since the aid package already went through a massive process designed to ensure it complied with U.S. laws, the one that Trump was doing. Mm-hmm. But the president can still make the decisions. However, there's no legitimate reason to mention the Bidens in that connection. And in this case, the president had all his advisors advising him that actually Ukraine was doing pretty well these days.
Yes.
Narrator, thanks to Joe Biden.
Yeah. I mean, that's well worth pointing out. Of course, in the rest of the explanation, Trump insisted that Zelensky had been elected on an anti-corruption platform,
right. So,
and they were doing great.
So that's basically all baloney, and it doesn't make any sense. Second, but that's the one that the Republicans will go with.
Yes. By the way, it was also the subject of the secretly taped conversation in which people only remember McCarthy saying Putin pays Trump. That whole conversation was about having just met with the previous prime minister who was on a course to clean up corruption and how happy all the Republicans were that he was succeeding.
Right, that Biden was succeeding in getting rid of corruption. So, second, the Department of Justice needs Ukraine help to find out what really happened in 2016. So the Department of Justice has already said it has no idea what investigation Mick is talking about. Yeah. And that's, the whole thing about Jack Goldsmith's analysis of that in terms of OMB, their obligations, and what's going on here. The entire intelligence community and the GOP-led Senate Intel community have confirmed multiple times Russia really did interfere with the 2016 election. It's all baloney. Now, there was an investigation into 2016 election stuff involved asking Ukraine for cooperation. It was the Mueller investigation, and the administration specifically pressured the Ukraine to stop assisting.
Yes.
Okay, so that leaves number three. It's bullshit. So that leaves number three. Trump wants dirt on a rival for an election, on a rival for an election campaign, that is to say Joe Biden, an action he's repeatedly and publicly confirmed he thinks is okay and would definitely do if presented with the opportunity, and he's previously said that with George Stephanopoulos, and there is tape. So he can't deny that.
Unless he does.
Okay? So, on balance, it's probably true that the administration is pursuing number two, how did Ukraine screw up the 2016 election by aiding Clinton, as well, since they clearly believe in that, and they clearly believe the entire intelligence community of the United States is deliberately lying and fabricating evidence. So the problem is that reason number two, the conspiracy that Ukraine threw the election to Clinton, is delusional.
That is a problem.
And the problem with number three, arms for dirt, is that it's illegal.
Yes, unless the president does it.
There's no explanation that really covers what's going on here, and that's why even Republicans were distancing themselves with Mulvaney. So he goes on the Sunday shows after all of this to try to clean this up and only puts his foot in it more and says basically there are two reasons, not three. Everything I said you guys got wrong, especially the part where you quoted me accurately because everything I said was on tape. But even more importantly, none of this really matters because Trump still sees himself in the hospitality business. He really has nothing to do with being president. And it was all about the rally. And he's really pissed that you guys screwed up his funding here. That's basically what he did. He got in there and he said that. And the Republicans are looking at each other and saying, how does this help?
Yeah. I can't figure out how. I really don't know what. I mean, I know what he meant. Pardon me, by saying that he considered himself to be in the hospitality business. I just don't understand why a chief of staff, acting or otherwise, would say that about the president. The president is distracted by presidenting.
Right. Can you imagine Jimmy Carter winds up putting sanctions on China to buy more peanuts because he says, even though I'm president, I'm still in the peanut business.
Yeah. No, I can't see that flying. And presidency is probably supposed to be your primary occupation. I do think it does.
Narrator, Carter put his peanut business in a blind trust.
Yes. I mean, everybody divests, but not this guy.
Not this guy, and in fact, he thinks he doesn't have to, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Right. But he says, but if there is, I already did it.
After the break, if we don't get to it, we're going to talk about why it matters, because, it really does.
Okay.
But I want to start with this really excellent they went to the diners and talked to people article.
They did?
In the Washington Post, because they actually went out to Staten Island.
Wow.
And Staten Island is a Trump borough within New York City. Yes. And the title of the article kind of says it all. I want to see what comes out of the woodwork. And they trace the Trump supporters going from nothing wrong a couple of weeks ago to by week 3, I just want to wait and see what comes out.
Interesting. Well, it is a compelling
Very
soap
interesting.
opera. If it wasn't for the fact that it was the fate of the country, it would be a great TV show. Right.
Or here's one quote. It's all nonsense, one of the supporters said in the first days. I'm watching it very closely, another said last week.
Okay.
This is an ungentrified Brooklyn and all of Staten Island, the forgotten borough. Many civil servants, police officers, firefighters, and the Wu-Tang Clan all come from Staten Island.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a fascinating trace of what's going on here. And you know what? We got some people here saying, no, I'm trying not to pay attention, but I can't help it. It's just seeping in. And, it's enough here. So maybe we should just wait and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, that is
that.
pretty
That is an actual really nice evolution of the Trump voter over time.
Yeah. Well, okay, it's good to see. I don't know how it's going to affect his hospitality business, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. By the way, another reason he's hiding his tax returns. To go way back in the theorizing on this, Mark Sumner, I think, was the first one I saw put this one out. It was his opinion that if we ever got to look at the taxes, it would likely show that he was attempting to visit his properties enough in order to continue to avail himself of real estate professionals' tax exemptions and tax benefits, even as he was president. So maybe he's not off the mark. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We had a little discussion during the break, going into the break, just to clear things up for where we stand on how big of a tax fraud Donald Trump actually is. I had referenced Mark Sumner's earlier work. I think it's probably like 2+ years old now that Mark had laid out that there's a profession or a designation, I guess, in the tax code for people who declare themselves to be primarily real estate professionals. That is, that the bulk of their income, I guess, comes from investment in an operation of real property, building towers and selling condos or whatever, like or Jared Kushner being a slumlord, things like that. And that with that designation comes special benefits, which are enormously beneficial for people who hold a large amount of real estate. You get among those benefits are special depreciation rates, I guess, or something analogous to depreciation rates that allow you to, write down the value of these things in terms of their value for taxation. And that's a big play for Trump for another reason, which is what Greg was alluding to. But Mark's story was that he was claiming these preferential tax rates on all of his real estate because of his designation as a real estate professional. Then he became president of the United States, which ordinarily makes it difficult to say, my main job is something else, because we all see you operating as president. You've been elected. We understand that to be your full-time job, even though admittedly, Trump never let on that he was doing this as a full-time job. But one of the conditions for being able to claim that you're a real estate professional is that you have to spend a certain number of calendar days each year on your properties, and presumably for the purpose of inspecting them, repairing them, basically generally maintaining your real estate portfolio. And for those who were wondering why it was that Trump was going to so many of his properties, golf properties or otherwise, one, he enjoys golf a great deal and hates being president. And the other was he was looking to log the correct number of days to continue to claim that he was a real estate professional so that he could pay these preferential rates on the taxes on all the real estate he owned. But if he let that get out, i.e. let people see his tax returns and he was claiming to be a real estate professional rather than president of the United States, it might be rather scandalous. And so they're not out, and they're not out from before he was president, and they're not out while he's president. But in addition to all of that, one of the other games that these guys play, is the whole point of the real estate professional designation was to pay preferential tax rates on your real estate. And that's what Greg was talking about, and it's ProPublica's story from last week, which we only hinted at the end of last week. But I guess we could spend a minute on that if you like.
Well, no.
No? Okay. But the basic...
I mean, we will.
Yeah.
I'll leave that for you. But
long story short was that he was just manipulating the prices and values of his real estate, telling the tax man that it was worthless so he wouldn't have to pay any money for it, and telling the banks that it was fabulously lucrative so that they would lend him billions of dollars based on that value. Okay.
Right.
There you
so,
go.
I mean, we could spend an entire show talking about what kind of fraud Trump is when it comes to his taxes.
Yes.
But the short story
his
there
hair and
is
his
it was a
pants
fraud.
as well. Yes. Okay.
So how does this play with America? Well, going back to Staten Island here.
Yes. Sorry.
Instead of going to diners like they do in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, it's New York, so they went to the bagel bin. And
getting a fight.
One fellow there, Joe Tompkins, was not there yet. He described himself as a gay sheet metal worker, a disillusioned Democrat turned Trump supporter. He read the whistleblower complaint, found its professionalism suspicious rather than convincing. He watched the Democratic leader of the impeachment inquiry, Adam Schiff, paraphrase the complaint and thought Schiff was a total joke. He'd seen how Trump was reacting and thought the president was a total and complete buffoon, capable of anything, and all of this had left him saying, I'd be open to it if I saw that the facts were there. Keep that in mind, because we're going to get to the PRRI poll and some comments by Rachel Bidikofer, which I think really cover that kind of sentiment. So at the bagel bin, a front page of the newspaper under the counter read Stonewall versus Democrats. And a story on page 7 was about a White House letter sent to House Democrats calling the impeachment baseless and unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. So a fellow walks in for a gallon of milk, and he looks at the cover and he says, the cynic in me thinks it's a witch hunt, but the realist in me thinks it was quid pro quo. Right? He's a libertarian-leaning Republican, no fan of Schiff. On the other hand, he said, I'm firmly behind the rule of law, and if they have enough proof to impeach the president, they need to move forward.
Yeah.
Right? The owner is definitely anti-Trump.
All right.
I try not to even listen to half of it. I get aggravated, he says. And the owner, Joe Garofalo, says, he should be impeached, but as long as the Republicans are in control, it's not going to happen. Every one of them is compromised. I think they're all corrupt. And the customer says, whatever. And Garofalo explodes and says, whatever. The president isn't supposed to ask foreign countries to go against his opponent. That's whatever.
It's contentious. It's good.
Right?
He's doing good.
So this is what's happening there. And a regular named Gary comes in, and he's with the owner. He's walking around like he's untouchable. They should nail his ass.
Yeah.
And then another guy's at the counter, a Trump supporter who's only beginning to tune into the news about impeachment. We're 3 weeks into it. We follow every detail. They can't help but hear it. It's just all over. That's the point I'm trying to make. Now, and again, we know that American adults learn by having the headlines being repeated multiple sources to the point where you can't avoid it. That's how people learn. They don't learn by picking up the story, reading it, and saying, oh, that's interesting, I'm going to internalize that. That's not how it works. So Trump is moving on to a different subject now. Syria, Turkey, U.S. troops, different phone call, different president. And this Trump supporter says, don't get me wrong, if he did something illegal with what is Turkey, Syria, Ukraine, that's right, Ukraine.
Yeah.
That's the thing. If he did something illegal, that's no good. And so now the guy, the lady, Stephanie McCrumman, who's documenting this, is now into the fourth week, just starting. Okay, by now, Igor Fruman and Lev Parnas is arrested. They're charged with campaign finance violations. It's clearly Rudy on the chopping block here. Congress is on its way back to Washington, and customer Richard Wickstrom is trying to sort out what's going on, too. He's a retired system analyst, reluctant Trump supporter who had stopped watching Fox News and turned to CNN. He stopped watching CNN. Now he gets his news from the BBC.
That's wise.
And says, I think what he did was wrong. Was he criminal? I don't know. I think he went overboard. Was it treasonous? I don't know. He's not sure whether he should be removed from office, but in the fourth week, he wanted to know more. And the article ends with, I want to see what comes out of the woodwork. And this is the evolution of the reluctant Trump supporter that we are following. It's not the Trump base that goes to the rally. The reluctant Trump supporter is hearing about this, and they have their doubts.
Okay. At least
all right.
in Staten
What's
Island.
it all mean? Well, two pieces here. First, this is a comment that Rachel Bidikofer made about, so what's happening with the election? And by the way, this theory gets put to the test next month in Virginia when your state is up for election.
Commonwealth. Yes.
Yeah, your Commonwealth, your state.
I'm sorry. People do.
It's only a Commonwealth to those who live there.
It's what people say.
Yeah, it's what people say.
Go to a diner.
Too. We don't pay any attention to it. It's your state, and it's up for re-election.
But they won't.
And here's the deal. So, Rachel says, Trump was the first presidential candidate in history to run a pure base mobilization campaign. At any other point in history, his candidacy would have been a disaster. Of course, at any other point in history, his candidacy would never have occurred. The Trump nomination is 100% conditioned on hyperpartisanship and polarization, but assuming he could be the nominee, Trump's issues and his rhetoric was a strategy that literally threw its middle finger up at persuasion. Keep in mind, when Lester Holt asked him during one of the three presidential debates, a major event watched by millions of people, whether he wanted to walk back the Obama was a Muslim, Trump said, nope. That's not how you appeal to independents. Nonetheless, pure Indies broke in favor of Trump. They did this despite Trump's base-centric campaign. And technically speaking, winning the vote of those Indies, that's the thing that carried him to the win, other than the protest balloting and low turnout. So why would he win persuasion voters over Hillary Clinton? Her argument, Bitkofer's argument, says, I argued these pure independents swung in a predictable way against the status quo, and Trump was not the status quo in 2016, but he will be in 2020. But don't mistake the fact that he won this group with the strategy, right? It was all strategy. There was little persuasion in the 2016 Trump effort, and there'll be little persuasion in 2020. I believe Brad Parscale knows the pure independents are going to break against them, and his path to the win is an electorate expansion. That's why they're doing the Facebook thing and doubling, tripling down on being incredibly racist. They're trying to use social media to identify people who could be turned. That last line is hers. The line before it is mine. And non-college educated white working class voters and blue collar Latinos can be brought out if they didn't vote in 2016. That's a bold, expensive plan, but it's their only path. So they're trying it, and it's not a bad plan. It's essentially what the Democrats should be doing, too, going after those same people to keep them away from Parscale and Trump. So the point of all of that is not, as people have taken it, that Bidikofer is saying you don't have to persuade, you only need to get your base to turn out. What she's saying is if you do that, you will win or lose based on the independents. And the independents hate politicians, they hate politics, they hate whoever's in office, and chances are they're going to vote against you. So if Trump is to win, he can't use those same people that he used in 2016. He's got to get new people to replace them and outnumber them, because the vast majority of those independents are going to break against him because now he's the incumbent. And remember, they hate everybody.
Yes.
Now, Clinton essentially was running as a semi-incumbent in 2016, continuing the Obama presidency. They voted against her. They're going to vote against Trump this time. So that's the background, and that's why when you look at those so-called reluctant Trump voters, right, they're not going to take the position that, oh my gosh, you've persuaded me based on the facts that Trump is really crooked. That's not what they're saying. That's not what that excellent Washington Post article is getting at. It's, I don't know, the realist in me saying, yeah, he probably did it, but, probably is all a witch hunt because they really hate him. I hate him. Everybody hates him. That's not unusual, right? But what should I do about it? Well, if there are facts there that say that he should be impeached, I suppose he should be impeached, even though I think that they're only doing it for political reasons. That's how they think.
Yeah, I guess. So who are the people that they're after? The Trump campaign, not the reluctant Trump voter, but
no, they're going to lose the reluctant Trump voter.
Yeah. So who are they targeting? What's left?
They are after the people who don't vote election after election after election.
Even
but this time will be motivated to come out because finally there's somebody who's saying what I always wanted to say.
Okay.
In other words,
that's what I feel like
if you are VDare or Stormfront or one of those groups that generally doesn't participate in presidential elections, because what's the point unless David Duke is running? Pascal and Trump want them to think we found our David Duke. Let's react the same way that the white evangelicals do and support him 80, 100%, whatever. And finally we'll turn out and vote. That's who they're looking for.
It's a plan that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, I guess I misunderstood, but I thought that's who they were after last time, and now they can't get them.
But they didn't get as many as they wanted, and that's why they lost the popular vote.
Instead, they got people who are clueless and said, I like The Apprentice, and what the hell? We'll just try it.
I don't like Clinton, and I just tend to vote against whoever's in.
Yeah.
And that group is large enough to swing elections.
Now the target is I don't vote for anybody ever, no matter what, because
but this
I want
time
a
I'll
racist
vote for you
run.
because finally somebody is standing up for me.
Okay,
it's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's funny
because they're spending a ton of money on it. That is what they are doing.
Yeah, that's if you haven't seen or you never bothered to watch the movie, the Brexit movie dramatization of the Brexit referendum and the people who ran it. With Benedict Cumberbatch in it, in case you need to be drawn in by star power. That movie actually explains the same election strategy, the same theory very well. They spend a tremendous amount of time explaining that they're going out there seeking people who have essentially dropped out of the electorate, even though they remain eligible, and just has stopped voting in the 1980s as a worthless exercise. And there's a great scene in which they take one of the MPs that they're working with to this part of town where they've identified all of these dropped out voters. It's house after house is full of disaffected, still registered voters, but people who haven't cast ballots in years. Yes. And the politician is like, I don't know where the hell we are. And he's like, well, we're in your constituency, man. You've never been here.
Right.
Right. I don't go here because the people here are worthless. They don't vote. Yeah, well, now we're going to get them to. And they did. So it's a great explanation of that theory. And to see it in action sometimes helps explain it. But that left me with the question of, well, who's left this time? And so, okay, it's a very subtle difference, but a difference nonetheless. A different group of people. Independents who hate everybody and may not vote typically, but occasionally do cast ballot. Now they're going for the hardcore resistors of participation in civilized society, but who, regardless, are 18 and American citizens. So, okay.
Right. So, again, two stories from different outlets kind of making the same point about the base, which is different than the point I'm making about the disaffecteds. From The Atlantic, nothing will persuade white evangelicals to support impeachment. New polling suggests that Trump's base is totally unified behind the president no matter what investigations reveal. We know that. That is his true base, is white evangelical voters. Mm-hmm. And you're not trying to persuade them. They are unpersuadable. Then this one from the New York Times, Jeremy Peters, who basically tries to look at everything from a Trump point of view. So it's interesting that he would write this. Trump's base digs in its heels even as support for impeachment grows. Republicans remain almost unanimously opposed to removing President Trump from office, leaving him with a loyal but shrinking core of supporters. So why do you say that? 99% of white evangelicals and 98% of Republicans who rely on Fox News as their primary news source do not believe Mr. Trump should be impeached and removed. And this is a survey by PRRI. And I want to turn to that survey because I think it's absolutely fascinating. and has some major implications for what happens with this election. But it also gives you an idea of what's going on right now. Now, don't forget, just like that reluctant Trump voter, okay, people aren't for impeachment until they are.
All right.
What is happening in real life is that Republicans are sick and tired of defending Trump. And so that's why nobody defends him in Washington. That's a fact. That's a happening. That's been documented. Some nice articles in the Washington Post about that over the weekend. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm just so sick of him. And it's hurting their standing. People like Joni Ernst's numbers are dropping in places at home because she won't defend them, but she won't talk about it. And that's not working. But what PRRI finds is that the culture war is real. Among 12 major political issues, Americans are most likely to rate health care as a critical issue, 65%. That's why when people say kitchen table issues, they're talking about health care. And that's why Elizabeth Warren's position on Medicare for All is so important. She says she's going to define it better as to how it gets paid for, which is a good thing. People upset about that who like Medicare for All are saying, why doesn't anybody else have to justify how they pay for their stuff? Why isn't Joe Biden and the public option people under the same scrutiny as Warren? And the answer is because Medicare for All is a bit of a radical change, and she's the front runner, so therefore that's why. But anyway, a majority also say terrorism is a critical issue. That's important because Trump is letting ISIS reconvene.
Yes.
Just under half feel similarly about climate change, 49%, immigration, 49%, and the fairness of presidential elections, 48%. So of those, immigration, you'd think, might help Trump, and actually most people don't like his immigration stance.
Yes.
Right? More than 4 in 10 Americans consider foreign interference in presidential election, 46%, crime, 45%, jobs and employment, and race relations to be critical issues. But they're less likely to care about the federal deficit, the gap between rich and poor, and trade agreements with other countries. However, the top 3 critical issues for Democrats and the top 3 issues for Republicans have nothing to do with each other.
That's not surprising.
For Democrats, health care, climate change, foreign interference in presidential elections. For Republicans, terrorism, immigration, and crime.
That's all the same thing to them.
Yeah, because they're being terrorized by immigrants who commit crimes.
Right.
Now, for independents, health care and climate change are prioritized by Democrats. And the third issue, terrorism, is at the top of the list for Republicans. But again, Syria is a big hit to that because Trump is allowing ISIS to reconstitute.
Yes.
All right, so keep that in mind. What I thought about this poll that was so fascinating is it says almost 2/3 of Americans say they're certain about the candidate they'll support. 4 in 10 say they'll support the Democrat. That's 37% over Donald Trump, no matter who the Democrat is. 3 in 10, 28%, say they'll support Donald Trump no matter who becomes a Democratic nomination. 37% against, 28% for. He's trailing in that particular number. But notably, 1/3 of Americans, 33%, those are the persuadables, say their vote will depend on who wins the Democratic primary.
All right.
However, only half of those Americans who say their vote depends on the identity of the Democratic candidate are likely to vote, are very likely to vote in 2020. Right?
Yeah,
the ones who have a firm choice and know who they want are committed to vote.
Yeah.
The ones who aren't really sure, and I guess it depends, aren't even committed to vote.
Yeah. No, could be someone terrible, so I won't come out.
So their preference depends on the Democratic candidate identifying as moderate and independent. That is to say, the moderates and independents are the ones who say that it depends who the Democratic candidate is. More interesting is this, and that is chances of voting in 2020. And this is where I think a lot of the analysis about what's going to happen comes down. 72% of Americans say they're absolutely certain to vote. And I think that's higher than in previous years at this particular point in time.
Yes.
13% they will probably vote. That's 85%. We never get 85% turnout.
No, and that's so some of them are liars.
But they're interested.
It's nice. Yes, it's good that you're interested in pretending.
Yeah, less than 1 in 10
Yes.
say their chances of voting are 50-50 or less than 50-50. Americans are significantly more likely to say they're planning to vote in the 2020 election more than a year in advance than they have said they were planning to vote in 2016. In other words, 72 versus 66.
Yes. Okay. That's
right. So people are more engaged now than they were in 2016. Turnout's going to be higher.
the people whose phone numbers they have anyway.
Right. Now, Americans who are absolutely certain they will vote tend to be older. The group is more likely to include seniors 65 and over than young people, 26% versus 15%. Americans who say they're absolutely certain to vote generally resemble the overall racial trends of the larger population. Okay. So it's a diverse group of people that say they're going to vote. It's not all white seniors.
All right.
But if you're a Democrat and you want to win, you better mobilize the young folks.
That's your better bet.
That's your better bet.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Interestingly, Americans report similar levels of enthusiasm toward voting among their close friends. More than 1 in 5, 22% of Americans say they think all their close friends will vote, while about half say most of them will. Fewer than 1 in 5 say only half their friends will vote, and only small proportions say few of the friends or none of them will vote. Fewer than 1 in 5, 18%, still a large number, say only half of their friends will vote, and a smaller proportion, 8. So like that's 24% of the population say, my friends maybe will vote, maybe will not. That's who Brad Parscale is aiming at. It's a large enough pool that if you pull a ton of votes out of there, you might squeeze out a victory. And that's why Rachel Bitecofer says, well, the Democrats would do well to also go after that vote. Because keep him home or get him to vote for you, and you take away his only path to victory.
Okay. What would we say to them?
What would we say to them? You'd say that the Democrats actually have something which might improve your lives.
Okay.
Right? If you're young and you don't feel like you need health care, think about who you know who might, and think about how it would work for you if you could actually afford the health care, which you can't afford now, or whatever it is that you think is persuadable to them, and say, it's really not all about Trump's personality. We get you don't like politics, but let's talk about some of the things we can do for you.
Okay.
I mean, you got to reach them in some way.
Yeah.
And so, it all comes down to Republicans are for him, Trump, and while moderate Republicans and Republican-leaning independents are less likely than Republican conservatives to say they prefer Trump over somebody else, he still retains a solid majority support among the Republican subgroups. Yet, this whole impeachment thing is going on, and so those numbers are subject to change.
All right.
Right? Trump's net favorability, lowest point since he took office in 2017. Only 1 in 3, 35%, say they have a favorable opinion of him. 64% say they have an unfavorable opinion. That's minus 29. 48% say they have a very unfavorable opinion. Highest since he took office.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
so these are really bad numbers for him, and they're dropping.
All right. And
job approval, 39%. 39 is low for him within his normal range, but still on the low end. And 60% disapprove.
Okay. Keep driving that with impeachment.
And importantly, Trump could lose more support than he might gain. Americans who disapprove of Trump's job performance are mostly set in their convictions, and there's almost nothing Trump could do to win their approval, say 3 out of 4 of them. All right? 8 in 10 Democrats who disapprove of Trump say there's almost nothing Trump could do to win their support. Most who disapprove of Trump are set in their ways. Americans who approve of Trump's job performance are more open to the idea of changing their mind. 2/3 of them say he could do something to lose their approval. And only 33% of his supporters say there's nothing he could do to lose their approval.
Okay.
Those are the white evangelicals.
I thought there would be more. I mean, that's what we all keep thinking. And it may be that they're
it's not more.
lying.
2/3 of his supporters could be. And that's why you go back to that Staten Island article and say, you know what? This impeachment stuff is starting to penetrate even among Trump supporters. Those reluctant Trump supporters are hearing all of this. They haven't changed their mind yet. They haven't turned on them yet, but they could. And it hasn't really been presented in a way that gets to them. After all, don't forget, because of various and sundry procedural reasons, The Democrats have decided to do the first phase of this behind closed doors. What happens next? We'll see.
Well, it's getting everybody interested in seeing what comes out of the woodwork, I guess.
Right.
So maybe it works.
I just thought I'd sum up what's going on here.
Okay.
It's all of a piece. Again, the idea that every Trump supporter, nothing you can do with, you just got to turn your own people out and beat them, misses the point. Yes, that's true. It's sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. You have to do a couple of other things. There's the persuadable Trump voters, and it turns out there's a lot of them, 2/3 of them. Don't waste your time with the rally goers. And it also turns out that a separate group, much smaller, the independents, the pure independents who don't have a party lean, tend to be on your side, so don't alienate them.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess it also depends on what what people think of when you're talking about Trump supporters. I suppose if you really sit down and work it out with people, they will realize, yeah, there are such things as reluctant Trump supporters, but in the offhand language.
Well, we used to call them the hold your nose voters.
Right. And offhand discussion, you're like, well, that's not really a Trump supporter. That's just a person who cast a ballot for Trump at some point.
Well, I want that person who cast a ballot for Trump not to cast a ballot for Trump.
Yeah. Maybe we can
Those are the only people that I want to persuade. The rest of them, whatever.
We'll drop leaflets in those in Staten Island that say, by the way, I don't know if you guys have read the Constitution, but if a president is being impeached and you cast a ballot for that president in the election, the vote automatically counts for the other side. And that'll be good voter suppression. Keep them home.
Yeah, I suppose. And besides, the election's on Wednesday.
But okay, yeah, right. That's another thing. Oh, right, yeah, that's another thing, right. For presidents who are being impeached, the election is Wednesday. That might work. Yep. Okay, good idea.
Vote on Wednesday to show your support.
Right. We'll give that one a try. It's worked for the Republicans in the past.
Right. Anyway, that's the summary for today, trying to tie it all together. Do not give up on persuasion. Just know who you're trying to persuade.
Yes. Well, okay. That's an important part of it. I'm glad we got through that article. I can't believe they keep going. Why do they never go to dinner places? Do nobody want to talk politics at dinner? Only breakfast? Or is that the only way to make your deadline? Okay. Well, we probably get a little peek into the truth there, too. Well,
yeah. But
maybe the bars.
Probably not going to accurately write it up for reasons.
Oh, that's true. Okay. Very good. Thanks, Greg. We'll catch up with you on Wednesday. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, where to go from there? It's very interesting. I do highly recommend the Brexit movie, by the way. I do think it is directly applicable to, and that's what made it so fascinating for me, directly applicable to what went on here. And I also think that was, I'm guessing that was the intent of the makers of the movie, or at least it was the intent of the makers of the documentary about the Brexit campaign and about Cambridge Analytica, was to overtly connect the two, and I think they actually did that in the documentary film, connecting the efforts by showing that the same players were involved and the same strategies were involved. I'm not certain that it was necessarily the intent, but it certainly could have been, of the makers of the dramatic version of the film. But in case you didn't see it, I saw it on HBO. I don't know whether they're still, I don't know how these things work these days. I guess it looks like it was an HBO production, which is also a new thing you have to kind of look out for. New in the sense that they've been doing it for 20 years and I only now acknowledge this. So I guess you can find it probably if you are one of those people with awesome cable packages that allow you to watch things either on demand or, it says here it is available on Amazon Prime Video as well. I don't really understand how that works, or unless what I'm looking at is, maybe that's just an advertisement for you to go and get Amazon Prime. It looked like, because it was displayed in a certain spot on the IMDb page for Brexit, that it was available on Prime Video. That doesn't make a great deal of sense. Maybe it's not true. I don't know. But you can watch on HBO on demand type things. I believe that's still the case. So as I mentioned, Benedict Cumberbatch is in it. There are other people in it, and they're famous actors, and I don't know who they are because I don't pay attention to enough pop culture to stay on top of these things, but I'm sure they're all fantastic and famous, and you'll know them from lots of other things. That's why I love IMDb. Later on, I find out, I recognize that person. Who is that person? What else have they been in? And then I find out. And when it's a British production, it's because they've all been in Game of Thrones or Downton Abbey or possibly Doctor Who. And that's how you learn these things. Anyway, the Brexit movie is chiefly the story of, in this case, the dramatized story of Dominic Cummings, whose name comes up occasionally on the show when we're talking Brexit and Boris Johnson. That's who Benedict Cumberbatch plays. That's how you'll remember it. Like Cher from Clueless, she knows Hamlet because Mel Gibson was in it, right? So, we can learn things this way too. By the way, as it turns out, the name of the actor who plays Nigel Farage in all of this is Paul Ryan. So that's a funny twist too, and maybe you'll remember that. Anyway, they do spend a great deal of time on the strategizing, wherein, there's all sorts of strategy going on, but Dominic Cummings makes a overt play for the dropped out voter, essentially, and points out, I think, specifically at some point in the discussion of the strategy, what a sizable portion of the electorate, or how large that portion of the electorate is who absence themselves typically from elections, and that if you can win some significant portion of them, you can get them out to the polls, chances are you'll be able to win them, and you'll be able to win them with a message that appeals to their alienation. That's why they're not voting, is they feel alienated. Appeal to that sense of alienation and make them feel like that for the first time in decades there's been a candidate for public office who's worth casting a vote for because he feels our pain, and it could be not only a bonanza of votes, but it will appear to come out of nowhere to the conventional political analysts and political strategists. The people running the Remain campaign would have missed this entirely because, well, that's the methodology of polling. That's actually what I was talking about when I threw out that aside comment to Greg during his recitation of the polling results. These are the results, so far as we know, among the universe of people whose phone numbers we have, because they are actually relatively likely to participate in elections. That's how we have their phone numbers, and that's how they make it through the filtration system. We're interested in their opinion because they are likely voters, or I guess that's the screen that we come to towards the end, right? The difficulty, I guess, and I imagine pollsters have got to be adjusting for this in some way now after the last time around, for what do we do about people who have never been on our radar before? And I don't know how you put them on your radar. I'm sure there's some methodology to it. I just don't know what it would be, but it's a very interesting problem to pose. How can we be sure that the president's approval ratings and his reelect numbers, and I'll definitely vote for somebody else no matter who it is if they're on the other side, versus I'll vote for Trump no matter what, and there's nothing he can do to make me change my mind and he won't lose my vote. Are we reaching them? Do we know where they are? Will they allow us to talk to them? Will they give us the right answer? Do they hate everything? So there's always that. As I know pollsters think about that. There's always been worry that there's a certain segment of the population that will give you the wrong answer on purpose to try to confound the political establishment. I don't know how well it works, but apparently it's a thing that people do. All right, let's see. What do we got here? There's more being sent my way. I guess Greg must be listening on this one here. What are you sending me? New polling supports our discussion. There's yet another one. This is New York Times. Voters in battleground states are deeply divided on impeachment. Okay, more of this. Is that what we're talking about? And the answer, I guess, how do you reach them? How do we reach them in polling, I guess is the question. How do we reach them? We reach them messaging-wise on Facebook, even though I guess we'd all prefer not to do anything on Facebook so that we could shut that place down once and for all. But I guess we're stuck with that one, at least through the 2020 election. How do we reach them? I guess that's like leafleting. So, all right, $1 billion worth of ads trying to convince them on Facebook that if you cast a ballot for a president who's got impeachment resolutions adopted against him, the votes are automatically counted for the other major party opponent. I don't know why anyone in the world would believe that, but remember that there are people out there who believe that if Trump is impeached but not convicted in the Senate, that entitles him to a third term in office. And that's no more sensible than what I'm saying. So I say, occasionally, I like to flirt with the idea of what if we lied terribly to the American people in the same fashion that Brad Parscale plans on lying to them and did lie to them in 2016. Is the answer we win? And is that okay? It isn't. But what do we do about that? What do we do about the fact that once again, we find ourselves in a position where Republicans are able to convince themselves that it's okay to lie in exchange for power, and we say we're above that, and then the end result is, what do you know? They lied and they have power. What are we going to do about that? So, we're never going to recommend to ourselves, openly anyway, that we simply do the same or take their path to power. Instead, I guess we say things like, well, we should identify these people and then tell them something truthful but persuasive that will make them either stay home or opt to vote for us or something. But again, I guess if you're saying, how am I going to reach, Facebook is how I'll reach them. How do I get Stormfront people who have never voted in their lives because they only want to vote for open racists to stay home? Because there's going to be a pretty open racist on the ballot. So I don't know. I mean, maybe there's no persuasive language with them, but I guess there's also probably another segment of the population out there. It can't be the case that all people who are disaffected and decide not to vote ever are deciding to do so because they're waiting for the biggest Nazi they can find. There must be someone else out there too. It's but anyway, I recommend that you go and watch Brexit. I mean, the most you can lose out of your life is 90 minutes or so. I think we can actually tell you how many minutes if we look in the right section of IMDb. There you are, 1 hour and 32 minutes. So almost exactly 92 minutes out of your life. I think it'll marginally improve your ability to understand something that we'll spend a certain amount of time discussing on the show, but you probably grasp it already anyway. But maybe there are other people that you could show it to and let them know. And I think a lot of people will be surprised with how clear the parallel, if they've got any political acumen at all, how clear the parallel is between the Brexit referendum and the Trump election. And it'll, some people still have yet to be woken up to that. It's amazing. Only to us who are political junkies here, and we occasionally forget that most of the rest of the world really just doesn't give a crap about the hair splitting that we're doing. It's important, it's true, and they're wrong to be so, but that's where they are. All right, let's see. What else can we pick up on thematically here? I just have been watching. It's been a tremendous explosion in the past couple of weeks of nuggets found in the mining of photo archives for pictures of Lev Parnas. Lev Parnas turns out is like Forrest Gump somehow. He is showing up in so many photos with Trump family members, Trump adjacent people, other Republican politicians who are having to give their money back now. Rick Snyder and who else? One of the other Florida politicians, the governor, having to give back their contributions. I mean, it doesn't really exonerate them in any way, but to return contributions from Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, the Sausage King of Odessa, and their global energy partners, or whatever the name of their stupid LLC was. I just see now Scout Finch, Jen Hayden, tweeting out from a while ago here, we are like one news cycle away from finding out Lev Parnas was actually one of Trump's children. There's a photo here tweeted out by Shelby Holiday, Wall Street Journal reporter, who says one of Parnas's first photos, posted in April of 2015, I guess one of his first Facebook photos, because I know we saw the photo of him from 2014 with Trump at what turned out to be an Ivanka Trump fashion show, which is a silly event all by itself. But anyway, one of Parnas's first photos, I guess from Facebook, posted in April 2015, shows him posing next to Ivana, not Ivanka, but mom, Ivana Trump, and his business partner, David, and we're still not sure how he pronounces his name. It looks like Correa, although it could be Korea, but not the country. Correia. And did he just get arrested? I think they finally found him at an airport, too. Airports is where they arrest all of these guys. Let's see. The caption of the photo says, remember his horribly named, but honestly named company, Fraud Guarantee. Fraud Guarantee Powwow. That'll make him a huge number of fans among the Native American crowd. Fraud Guarantee Powwow at Leak. I don't know what that's supposed to be. LIQUE. I guess that's a club. You know, I'm not going to be familiar with the New York, Florida Russian mobster club scene. Fraud Guarantee Powwow at Leak. The atmosphere trumps the rest. Get it? Trumps. Haha, trumps. It's all in caps. Trumps the rest. Hashtag Fraud Guarantee. That's not really much of a hashtag, is it? Hashtag Ivana Trump, hashtag Big Business, which it totally isn't. Hashtag Great Vibe, which likewise isn't going to yield what you think. And just really nobody's using that. And look at that. Hashtag Last Night. That's not going to work for anything. And hashtag Trump, which will work. How odd. Let me zoom in on that picture. Yeah, I don't know who else there is in this photo. Let's see. These I got no idea. Oh, and by the way, there is then somebody who chimes in on this, who uses the username on Facebook, Leak, Lique. These reactions are not for me. Wrong Leak. I'm a Dutch artist. www.leakangel.nl, Netherlands. So, poor Leak got all of that, but now that guy should be a witness before Congress. So we'll be talking to Leak the artist anytime in the next couple of weeks. All right. I don't know. I just found that one rather fascinating. Okay. Let's see. Other stories of the day. This one probably not of huge interest, but just a reminder of exactly what's going on Russian mafia-wise down in Florida. I found this article somewhat interesting, and we'll skip around in a little bit. I'm not certain what this guy thought he was doing. Fred Grimm, writing in the Sun Sentinel down in Florida, has this story titled 6 Trump Towers Later, Kitschy Sunny Isles Becomes Moscow by the Sea. And we already knew. This is from Friday. He had written this and published this. We already knew about Sunny Isles, Florida, having a huge concentration of Trump-branded condo buildings, and we know all about the maternity trade that they do. We read about the various shady characters who sold the condos there, and the shady characters who bought them there, including there was like the guy who was the head of the biggest motorcycle gang in Moscow or something. And there were a number of Ukrainian shady figures as well. Parnas had a place down there. So that part of it isn't news. And I mentioned the maternity trips. They've mentioned it down in here too. This guy has a weird angle on the story and takes it on this way. I miss the old sunny isles. back before the town's quirky persona was commandeered by dodgy emigres given to Trumpian ostentation and opaque real estate deals consummated by shell corporations and offshore banks. Wow, he's mad. And what struck me about this, actually, was that ordinarily this would be a story that Trump supporters would point to and say, see, immigrants came and they changed the character of this whole town and they ruined it. Except that these are immigrants who were paying money to Donald Trump, and Russia is our friend, and so therefore everything was cool. Back before Sunny Isles was a home address for Rudy Giuliani's sleazeball Ukrainian fixers. Grimm continues. It's a little xenophobic, except that what he's really pointing out here is, I don't like criminals very much, and that's a difficult position to fault. He continues here. The old Sunny Isles, a beach town 1.3 miles south of Hallandale Beach, was once a linear tableau of South Florida kitsch, a seaside strip of themed motels offering homage to ancient Egypt, Rome, the Wild West, Polynesia, American Indians. I bet they did a great job on it too. And so many nautical motifs, including Neptune and his water nymphs. How about that? A real loss to America. You could find me under the rough-hewn timbers of the Wreck Bar at the Castaways Hotel, a joint built to evoke a long-ago sailing galleon, the walls lined with portholes, the waitresses looking not at all like sailors, noting here parenthetically that during the go-go era, the Wreck featured rather more naughty than nautical dancers, mad maids in gilded cages, which is probably something we could stand to be rid of and are glad of the fact that we are. But okay, that's Sunny Isles, the kitschy part of it. The marriage of mid-century architecture and American whimsy should have been protected as a historical treasure, like South Beach's Art Deco district 10 miles south. But the likes of Donald Trump beat out the preservationists. Yeah, sometimes that stuff does get beaten out by developers. It's just a little too recent and still sort of on the outs, culturally speaking, to warrant a great deal of support publicly for preservation. And it's still 10 years shy of hipster value. And once you hit that critical point, you might be able to get something like that preserved. They're better at that in L.A. than in Florida. I mean, Florida's a developer's paradise, so it's very difficult to beat the developers, and preservationists are going to lose a lot in Florida. Before South Floridians realized what they were losing, Sunny Isles Beach, as the developers rechristened it in 1997, replaced the motels with, count them, 6 Trump Towers and stacks of other uber luxury condos with brands as subtle as, this is interesting, the Armani Casa and the Porsche Design Tower. Today, nearly 4 dozen hotel and condo towers blot out the eastern horizon. That's just development in Florida for you. And, unfortunately, that's the way it goes. But by the way, it struck me as I was reading it, the Armani Casa. That is pretty cheesy. So appealing. I mean, did they invest in it? Did they get a cut of it, the Armani people, or do they have a case to sue there? Porsche Design Tower. I'm curious because it reminds me actually of the deal that fell through in New York of the Bulgari Tower, which involved Paul Manafort and Dmitry Firtash, among others. Just sort of interesting. And the idea of putting up an ultra-luxury tower in Manhattan and connecting it to Bulgaria. And I'm curious what sorts of deals there are with the brands whose names they are appropriating in all of that, and whether they're the same players. Because a lot of the people who put money into the construction of these various Trump towers down in Sunny Isles also played in his New York deals, and in particular the Trump Soho, which is about I guess probably the dirtiest of the development deals done in Manhattan under the Trump name, directly under the Trump name, and involved Felix Sater and a number of other really shady characters putting up a lot of the financing. This is about where Michael Cohen appears to have gotten involved in all of this stuff too. So worth keeping in mind that this is where the idea for, I guess, the idea of a Bulgari project probably grew out of the already existing Armani and Porsche plays in Sunny Isles. Curiously, it ended up involving Trump adjacent former Soviet shady figures and their money, and they turned out to be the same people. That's why I brought this up. Anyway, back to Fred Grimm's piece here. The Trump Royale. Did you know that was the name of one of the places? The Trump Royale now looms over life-sized statues of 3 camels and their Arab drivers at the entrance of the fading Sahara Beach Resort, one of the last remnants of a lost era. The scene captures the transformation of Sunny Isles from middle-class kitsch to high-roller tacky. Tourists from the heartland have been replaced by murky characters like Igor Fruman and Lev Parnas, which again, I mean, I know this doesn't seem to have a great deal of news value, and I'm just sort of thinking about it as I ponder the idea of how to message lost voters in, who are brought up in Greg's segment. The number of people who are turned off immeasurably by the developments in Syria because terrorism is one of their top priorities, etc. And those for whom Trump's xenophobia resonates, those for whom Trump's attacks on what he alleges is democratic hypocrisy resonate. Like the idea that there are entire towns in America who Trump has personally profited from changing the character of through immigration, including the immigration of a distinct criminal element, all of which is supposed to be at the heart of his campaign against immigration, and yet it's done here. And not only that, but even the dubious designation of anchor baby that we're trying to do away with. But that happens with this as well. You'll see. I'll clear that up in case you have somehow forgotten that connection with Sunny Isles is also mentioned in this article. But thinking about also the Midwestern heartland tourist who was able to afford a Florida vacation by going to this kitschy spot in Florida, pushed out by, high roll, what did they say here? Kitschy, high roller, tacky, tourists / money laundering refugees / maternity tourists from Russia. I mean, that should resonate with them, if you can message it just right. Anyway, he continues on after saying tourists from the heartland have been replaced by murky characters like Igor Fruman and Lev Parnas. Then he goes on to describe them. We know all about them. Fruman, 53-year-old native of Belarus, owner of what the New Yorker describes as an aptly named nightclub in Odessa, Mafia Rave. And Parnas, 47, his Ukrainian-born business partner, have been charged with channeling nearly $700,000 in illicit foreign donations to Republican campaigns, including $325,000 to a pro-Trump PAC. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Rick Scott, as we mentioned, have apparently rid themselves of the pair's tainted donations, if that matters, money being fungible and all. The Miami Herald reports that Fruman and Parnas were intent on greasing their way into medical and recreational marijuana distribution licenses. Remember that? In Florida and Nevada. Their company, Global Energy Producers, didn't seem to do much of anything other than provide a conduit for foreign political donations and hire Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani for $500,000. Reportedly, the pair were helping Rudy in his infamous search for politically damaging information about Joe Biden. Politico reports that Parnas once rented a condo on the 42nd floor of the Trump Palace in Sunny Isles, not the Trump Royale, but Trump Palace, until his landlord complained to police that Parnas had threatened him with a gun. Fruman resides in a tower 3 blocks north of the palace. The neighborhood has plenty of other residents from the old Soviet bloc as well, we are reminded. 2 years ago, Reuters reported that at least 63 Russians had spent $98.4 million buying condos in the 6 Trump-branded luxury towers in Sunny Isles and a 7th in Hollywood. So within a very small area here, what they're telling us, not only reminding us of the amount of money that shady Russian characters have spent on those condos, but there are 7 Trump-branded condo buildings all in this tiny little area, plus another 703 units in the 7 Trump buildings that had been purchased by so-called limited liability companies that mask the owners' identities. So we're talking about now 14 Trump condo towers in what is essentially, I guess, one of the most fraudulent and corrupt zip codes in America down there in Florida, Sunny Isles and the Hollywood area. Amazing. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I will actually continue with this Sun Sentinel piece just so we can hit a couple more points here. But I guess worth thinking about as we unravel the Ukraine situation, as we continue to convince ourselves that there is no difference between the Ukraine scandal and the Russia scandal, that they all happily overlap and coexist. Sunny Isles is going to be revealed eventually as a clearinghouse for all of the people. There's a central hub from which all the people directly implicated in either one of those scandals overlapped and came to know one another and came to agree to work together on the schemes central to those for which we'll be impeaching the president at some point. All right. Continuing on here, in 2016, a Miami Herald investigation found that dozens of Sunny Isles condos, many in Trump-branded properties, had been purchased by Russians suspected of illicit doings. We've read those articles on the air. International fraud investigators suggest that Sunny Isles real estate provides corrupt Russian officials an anonymous place to invest their loot, safe from the scrutiny of cops and tax collectors back home. No wonder they call Sunny Isles Moscow by the Sea. In 2017, the Daily Beast reported that Moscow travel agencies, I believe we've read these, or certainly referred to this situation in the past, Moscow travel agencies were marketing $85,000 travel packages to Russian mothers-to-be, including airfare, hospital maternity ward fees, and a place to stay until the big day arrives, a condo in a Trump tower on Sunny Isles Beach, complete with gold-tiled bathtubs and a chauffeured Cadillac Escalade. Fly to Miami pregnant, return home a few weeks later, well-tanned, with a new little American citizen in tow. Last year, a Russian couple was busted on the 18th floor of another Trump tower for running a high-end call girl operation. They offered customers, quote, Russian dolls. How fun is that? No such Russian dolls hung out at the old rec bar I'd remember, says the increasingly curmudgeonly Fred Grimm. So his chief complaint about it is, the old seedy place that I like to hang out has been replaced by a new, higher cost seedy place that may or may not have a central role in building the impeachment case against Donald Trump. That's the important part of all this. The nature of his complaint is just a new entree to the same story, but I thought it was worth pointing out and reminding everybody. I guess there is a story to be played there for the hardcore Trump supporter for whom there's nothing that can change their support of Trump. I guess it won't work. But I mean, right here in microcosm, right where we're going to have to be doing some investigating for the serious work of an impeachment inquiry, there is another story that there is an ongoing Trump operation that is dedicated to the importation of a criminal immigrant element intent on changing the character of a quintessentially American town and pushing regular middle class Midwestern heartland Americans out and replacing them with flashy, money laundering, high rolling former Soviet gangsters, and all the crap that they bring with them, including shady immigration schemes that send people home with American citizens to whose star they can hitch themselves to get themselves some American citizenship along the way. And even if that isn't necessary, they can always buy some of those investor visas that the Kushners sell, although they sell them chiefly to Chinese customers instead. All right. Just wanted to get that one out there and on the record to remind you it's there and that we've talked about it in the past. Other news items of interest, I'm going to scan both the Twitter feed and Pocket, because increasingly these days the stuff that is making it to Pocket is excluding some of the really interesting smaller stories that get traded in Twitter. I'm just trying to think of what would be the best of the items from the Twitter feed in the last couple of days to bring up. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not that bad. It's just sort of moment-by-moment developments that don't lend themselves to extensive investigation, perhaps. All right. Let's see. Oh, one of the fun stories that developed over the weekend and that others have suggested might be something worth our time. The very weird story of Mitt Romney's secret Twitter account. He let slip in an interview with someone else here. It must be McKay Coppins in The Atlantic, apparently. Got a hold of this story. But then Ashley Feinberg got her teeth into it and made it a story that we were actually interested in reading. We did not read, and I don't think at any point set aside McKay Coppins's lengthy profile on Mitt Romney, because what do you need to know at this point about Mitt Romney? Well, there was some news in it, and I'll just read Ashley's account of things. I did see this develop over the weekend on Twitter when the profile came out and everybody realized that at some point Romney owns up to Coppins that he has a secret lurker account on Twitter that he uses to follow the news but rarely to participate in the discussion on Twitter. And I saw people say, Ashley Feinberg is definitely going to want to dig into this and see if she can identify the secret identity. I guess this is a particular pastime of hers. She's done it before. And I guess it goes to show how poorly trained in operational security most politicians who even so hold security clearances actually are. They just can't keep it secret, and mostly because they have a politician's ego attached to it. And this story, I think, is no different. She begins this way. Earlier today, that would have been Saturday, the 20th, The Atlantic's McKay Coppins published a lengthy profile on Mitt Romney, apparently part of Romney's effort to set himself up as the noble Republican foil to an out-of-control president. Everyone's already frustrated by his efforts there, but okay. These sorts of pieces, which are more about narrative setting than anything else, typically don't contain a lot of new information, but this one had a notable exception. About midway through, the usually guarded senator revealed that, just like fellow lone voice of reason haver James Comey, he was the owner of a secret Twitter account. At one point, as Coppins asked him about the hashtag impeach Mitt Romney that Trump tweeted into being earlier this month, Romney said this. "That's kind of what he does," Romney said with a shrug, and then got up to retrieve an iPad from his desk. He explained that he uses a secret Twitter account. "What do they call me? A lurker. To keep tabs on the political conversation. I won't give you the name of it," he said, "but I'm following 668 people." Don't give that away. Swiping at his tablet, he recited some of the accounts he follows. Bad problem. Including journalists, late-night comedians, including, it says parenthetically, what's his name? The big redhead from Boston. Conan O'Brien? Yeah, that's the guy. And athletes. Trump was not among them. He tweets so much, Romney said, comparing the president to one of his nieces who overshares on Instagram. I love her, but it's like, it's too much. In other words, back to Ashley here, a wealth of information that would be highly useful to anyone hoping to track down the senator's supposedly secret Twitter hideout, or more specifically, to me. The chances seemed high that Romney, a known family man, would want to keep close tabs on his offspring, and as luck would have it, Romney has plenty of offspring. Great sleuthing here. Great place to start. Not all of his 5 sons have public Twitter accounts, and some of them, like the dreaded Tag, have too many followers to possibly dig through. Romney's oldest grandchild, Allie Romney Critchlow, however, has just 481 followers, making digging through them an annoying but not impossible feat. As I scrolled, while focusing on the ones that appeared to make an effort to conceal their real identities, one in particular caught my eye. This is great methodology, she explains here. Reader, meet Twitter user QAWS 9876, otherwise known as Pierre Delecto. Wow, it is, that's pretty funny. So I'm throwing my head back here in my squeaking chair. That's just funny. Pierre Delecto. What is that? This account joined the site in July of 2011, just 1 month after Romney announced his run for president. And I guess his son, Tag, told him, there's this thing, Twitter, you got to be on it, etc., etc. Why don't you take care of that for me, Tag? Okay, sure. Anyway, the majority of people it follows are either political reporters, politicians, political operatives, or pundits, though it also follows noted big redhead from Boston, Conan O'Brien. See, there's your clue. Pierre Delecto appears to be a fan of the late-night hosts Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon, too, as well as current and former NFL players Tom Brady and Brett Favre, respectively. Pierre Delecto currently follows 702 accounts, which is a few more than the 668 Romney admitted to Coppins, but it's certainly possible to follow 30 additional accounts over the course of a few weeks, especially for a user that appears to have recently upped its Twitter activity. The Pierre Delecto account's very first follow was, and this is a great way to get caught, eldest Romney scion Tag, joined shortly thereafter by Glenn Johnson, a current politics editor for Boston.com, who was firmly on the Romney beat around the time that the account was originally created. Next was Mark DeMoss, who the Salt Lake Tribune described in 2012 as a quote, unpaid advisor to Mitt Romney's presidential campaign for the past 5 years. And Eric Fernstrom, who still has former Mitt Romney advisor in his Twitter bio, which really, come on. Anyway, in general, the account follows everyone you might expect someone like Mitt Romney to follow. There's the late Charles Krauthammer, the late John McCain, Larry Kudlow, Rupert Murdoch, Bill Kristol, Matt Schlapp, it says Schlapp, but it's Schlapp, right? And who else but Peggy Noonan. Yawn. It also follows all the people you would expect someone who is exactly Mitt Romney to follow. There are all of the available Romney children, a number of former Romney advisors and aides, like a lot of them that are all linked here, and quite a few reporters who've directly covered Romney or his various campaigns, like Ashley Parker, Matt Visor, Philip Rucker, Stephen Peoples, and Coppins himself, all of whom were on the Romney beat in 2012, among others. Then there are the accounts it's hard to imagine anyone but Mitt Romney following. There's this seemingly random person who managed to snag the Senator Romney Twitter handle, the Romney parody account, Alt-President Romney, right? And various fan-run accounts like New York for Mitt and Mitt Romney _2016. There's also the apparently official, based on the fact that the first person to follow it was Romney's former digital director, though never utilized, since it only sent one tweet, account Mitt_NH, New Hampshire. Okay. Our Pierre Delecto was the 23rd person to follow this account, almost directly after it was followed by the official Team Romney account, and right before a number of reporters jumped on board, which would seem to indicate at least some sort of heads up. There's also John Moe, M-O-E, a photographer from Utah who's taken family photographs of the extended Romney clan. He's also tweeted this on John Moe Photos Twitter account, Surfers for the Romster, a picture of a guy, a surfer, an older surfer, with a Mitt Romney-themed surfboard, which was so popular among the kids back in the day. Pierre Delecto's 8 followers mostly seem to be the sort of any random account on Twitter. What is this? Pierre Delecto's 8 followers might mostly seem to be of the sort any random account on Twitter might accumulate, there we are, if it festers around the site long enough. The one notable exception here is its most recent follower, Darlin1Patience. Because Darlin1Patience's account is private, there's no easy way to see everyone it currently follows. A little digging into some Mitt-adjacent accounts, however, reveals that Darlin1Patience does follow a few lesser-known members of the Romney family, like Craig Romney, who has only a little over 3,300 followers, and eldest Romney grandchild Allie Romney, with her just under 500 followers. It's certainly notable then that Darlin1Patience, who only follows 194 people at the time of publication, also follows Pierre Delecto. Then we have the tweets, and this is where it really becomes funny and interesting. Pierre has only ever tweeted 10 times total, and all of them have been replies to other tweets. Certainly the sort of behavior one might expect to see from a self-described lurker. The account's first tweet, coming a whole 4 years after its initial registration, was a show of frustration at Fox News for not yet having a New Hampshire presidential poll up. It's December 27, 2015. A Fox News tweet showing Donald Trump with a slight lead in New Hampshire, and Pierre Delecto answering, "Why isn't your New Hampshire poll up on your website?" What? I mean, okay. Mitt Romney was living in New Hampshire at the time. The next tweet didn't come until May of this year, when Pierre was moved to point out to a Bloomberg reporter that he had forgotten to include Romney in a list of senators sticking up for Richard Burr, which is, I guess, supposed to show your independence, even though Richard Burr is pretty much a traitor, just like Aaron Burr was. And I don't know why he gets to hold himself out as distanced from Trump. But anyway, here in May 9th, Stephen Dennis, the Hill reporter why can't I bring that up? All right, well, that's a screenshot, that's why. But Stephen Dennis tweeting on May 9th, GOP senators sticking up for Richard Burr, Blunt, Shelby, Collins, Rubio. Pierre Delecto replying, Romney too. Said to Post that he has confidence in Chairman Burr. Okay, super important point, right? Next was a tweet to Romney's Senate colleague Dick Durbin, whom Pierre casually addressed as Dick, followed by a series of tweets defending Mitt Romney's honor. I don't think it could be any clearer, right? First, Jennifer Rubin's tweet from May 31st, inside Romney's Trump strategy. His strategy is non-confrontation verging on spinelessness, she says, tweeting the Politico story. Pierre Delecto responding to her, Jennifer, you need to take a breath. Maybe you can then acknowledge the people who agree with you in large measure, even if not in every measure. It's a very measured tweet. It's a very Mitt Romney tweet. It pretty much gives away the game. There's another tweet here embedded in all of this. There's a couple of them here. Soledad O'Brien's tweet of June 8th, 2019, referring to a piece in The Hill that says Mitt Romney says he may not endorse Trump in 2020. Soledad commenting, utter lack of a moral compass. Pierre responding, only Republican to hit Trump on Mueller report. Only one to hit Trump on character time and again. So, Soledad, you think he's the only one without moral compass? Not a A well-engaged tweet, by the way. 15 likes at the time that the screenshot was captured, 4 for Pierre Delecto's answer to Jennifer Rubin. Joe Scarborough tweeting on September 22nd of this year, in response to a Mitt Romney account, the actual verified Mitt Romney account says, if the president asked or pressured Ukraine's president to investigate his political rival, either directly or through his personal attorney, it would be troubling in the extreme, critical for the facts to come out. Pretty non-committal, right? Scarborough says, he did 8 times, says the Wall Street Journal. Your move, Mitt Romney. Pierre Delecto, responding to this rather than Mitt Romney, says, quote, says Wall Street Journal. See? Right? Credible, but not certainty. Let's see the transcript. That's a powerful defense from Pierre Delecto. Britt Hume on October 7th tweeting in response to a Daily Caller tweet, which says, Romney says, America is an unreliable ally after Trump pulls troops out of Syria. Britt Hume commenting, some might say Romney is too an unreliable ally. Does Romney respond? No, but Pierre Delecto does. Loyal to principle, Trump's loyalty or party or person. To party or person, right, Britt? What does that even mean? Loyal to principle, Trump's, not the actual Donald Trump. Loyalty to principle, Trump's loyalty to party or person, right, Britt? Well, Britt didn't have anything to say about that one. He didn't care because the unidentified Pierre Delecto just wasn't saying anything interesting, like the real Mitt Romney. All right, back to Ashley here, who then says, more recently there was a tweet expressing unhappiness at Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Syria, which Romney has publicly condemned, while also insisting on the Senate's powerlessness. As Romney a move as there ever was. First, the tweet of John Weaver, who I guess, I don't even recognize the name, but you probably do, who tweets as JWGOP, I guess a Republican operative of some kind. John Weaver saying Donald Trump has betrayed our allies in Syria at the behest of Russia and Turkey. Wow. Innocent children, women, and men will be killed. ISIS will have the opportunity to reconstitute, and America won't be trusted again. Congrats, GOP Senate. Well done. To which Pierre Delecto naturally responds, John, agree on Trump's awful decision, but what could the Senate do to stop it? One wonders. And on Saturday, Pierre Delecto offered a bashful joke in response to an Eric Erickson tweet full of Romney praise. Eric having tweeted, I commend Senator Romney for not being fearful and for sharing his concerns. Frankly, more Republican senators need to speak up, not for impeachment, but to correct the president that he might not so recklessly behave. Stilted. Pierre commenting to Eric, don't read the comments ever. Okay, that is a pretty bashful joke. Like, he left the humor out of that one. Of the 257 tweets the account has liked over the last 8 years, 30 of them came from the official @Senator Romney account. 28 came from the official @Mitt Romney account. 7 were tweets quoting either the Senator Romney or Mitt Romney accounts, and 3 included a direct mention of one or the other. Even more were about Romney generally, without mentioning an official Twitter handle. Here are just a few of these Romney-centric tweets beloved by Pierre, who I guess is searching his own name. Let's see. Well, there's a couple of them. They're pretty much randoms here. Beth Myers saying of a James Homan tweet, which mentions Madeleine Albright, saying, classy lady. James Homan says at a House Intelligence Committee hearing, Madeleine Albright just formally apologized to Mitt Romney for making fun of him in 2012 when he said Russia was our biggest geopolitical foe. She says the Utah senator was prescient. Points there. Beth Myers saying, classy lady. Josh Moon saying, as Republicans turn on people like Mitt Romney and U.S. intelligence agents, I'd like to remind everyone that the crook they're stupidly protecting is banned from operating a charity in all of New York because he and his swindling kids stole from a children's cancer charity, which is an excellent tweet all by itself. And Mitt Romney apparently liked it, as Pierre Delecto. There are a few more, and may not necessarily be worth going through every single one of those. Among Pierre's liked tweets that don't directly mention Mitt Romney, George Conway Kellyanne Conway's outspoken never-Trumper of a husband, appears to be a particular favorite, with Pierre liking quite a few tweets that call Trump's fitness for office into question, as well as this one expressing frustration at Lindsey Graham. George Conway tweeting back, Graham tweeting, "To the Turkish government, you do not have a green light to enter into northern Syria. There is a massive bipartisan opposition in Congress, which you should see as a red line you should not cross." Probably not the right choice of words there, red line. Conway responding, "It's hard to know what to say about this." Say nothing. Pierre Delecto also liked this tweet, tentatively supporting an invocation of the 25th Amendment. We'll skip the various tweets, but just give you a flavor for what they're about. Perhaps more revealing among the account's liked tweets, though, is this. One of the Devin Nunes's cow tweets here. "You were cheating on your second wife," he says to Newt Gingrich, "with the woman who is now your third wife, even while impeaching Clinton for cheating on his wife. Show yourself out." And then from back in June of 2016, interestingly, the David Burge tweet, "Hopefully Hillary will inspire a new generation of girls to marry ambitious perverts who will pay off their embarrassment with Senate seats." Aha. So back in the day, back in June of 2016, before it had all been lost to Trump, he was still as much a conniving, backstabbing dirt monger and smear merchant as he now accuses Trump of being, when it was still his day. Anyway, there is one remaining mystery, however, the username. The handle QAWS9876 doesn't hold any obvious significance to Romney, although considering the four letters are all directly adjacent to one another on a standard keyboard, QAWS doesn't, I guess. Now they're all directly adjacent to one another on a standard keyboard, and the numbers are simply run backward, 9876. Yeah, it seems entirely possible that it was an attempt at a random placeholder text. The name Pierre Delecto, however, is harder to explain. Pierre certainly does seem like a name Mitt Romney type looking for an alias might choose, though the Delecto is less clear. We've reached out to Romney for comment, and we'll update if and when we hear back. In the meantime, if you know anything about our new friend Pierre Delecto, or any other secret social media account members of Congress might be holding on to, please do let us know, and there are some updates. Let's see, 7:24 p.m. that night, Saturday. Shortly after this post went up, Pierre Delecto made the account private, then public for a few minutes, then private once more. We've replaced the embedded tweets with screenshots accordingly. And then 9:39, folks, it's Mitt. A tweet from McKay Coppins. It says, "Just spoke to Mitt Romney on the phone and asked him about Pierre Delecto. His only response, c'est moi." Remember that he did his mission in France, right? Updated my story accordingly. You can go to The Atlantic and read that if you like. I don't care. The story I cared about was here. Congratulations to Ashley Feinberg for doing the detective work. It doesn't change history in any way, but it does give us a revealing look into what does, I guess that's a look behind the curtain at the claim that somebody made that if there were a private way of balloting, that probably something like 30 Republican senators might actually vote to remove Trump from office in an impeachment trial. I guess when he thought he was speaking privately, he was liking tweets about Trump's unfitness for office, the 25th Amendment, and the seriousness of his abandonment of the Kurds in Syria. Not that you could ever expect Mitt Romney or any other of these Republican senators to actually do anything about it. That's a totally different thing. I know. I recognize that, but it gives some credence to that reporting. And I think that's worth holding on to and looking at if we're really trying to define something out of the situation. And if we ever are in a position where we will really have to try and figure out what are the odds of getting a conviction and what are the sorts of impeachment articles that might draw out some Republican support. So, okay, very interesting story. Well worth taking a look at, even if it's not central to the developments of the day. It's a difficult thing to try to summarize a Trump weekend, especially if you try your best not to watch him tweet rant throughout the weekend. Much more to catch up on, and we will spend Tuesday doing that. I'm sure there will be further developments. Wednesday, we'll welcome Joan McCarter back and have Greg with us once again. But we're in for another wild ride here. And I'll tell you what to do next, as I always do. Stay tuned right here on Netroots Radio for Justice Putnam's program, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see what he's got on tap for you. Mike Pompeo said he can't talk about internal deliberations inside the administration, but that he has defended every career State Department staffer and diplomat when it's appropriate. The problem is he never thinks it's appropriate. Then, on the rest of the menu, border agents are patrolling hospitals to find sick immigrants to deport. Bastards. The GOP advanced another ultra-conservative Trump judicial pick who has almost no legal experience. Second time since the Ghost Hunter, I think.
From Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com.
And more. Hang on just a second.
You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's news. The EPA kept its West Coast team out of the loop as Trump's feud with California escalated. And internationally, very often we find at the shelf's table here, at least four killed and scores injured in Bangladesh over a Facebook post that offended Muslims. Another one of these situations. That and much more. Stay tuned. Next.